We're going to use the folded corner clipper. This is an excellent tool for making binding. I'm using 2.5-inch strips and we're going to place them on top of each other with right sides up. Now I'm going to use the straight edge side of the ruler to cut the selvages off. For this binding, we're using 2.5-inch strips, so we want to make sure we place the 2.5-inch mark at the bottom edge of the binding and put the blunt end at the top. Let me show you again. Make sure 2.5 inches at the bottom and corner and the blunt edge at the top. Now we're ready to cut. We're going to use this edge right here to match the pieces together just like a puzzle. Place your binding pieces right sides together, and as you will see, they will match up perfectly. And we'll sew a 1/4 inch right along the edge. Today I'm using the Continental M7 and I'm aligning my edges here using the 1/4 inch foot to make a 1/4 inch seam to hold the binding pieces together. And voila! Perfect pieced binding. Repeat the process until you have a long strip to fit your quilt. Here's my long binding strip. Fold your binding wrong sides together and press all the way down. Here's the front of my quilt. And here is the long piece of binding. I want to machine bind my quilt on the front and the back rather than hand sewing it to the back. So I need to flip my quilt over and take the binding and place it with the raw edges against the raw edges of the quilt and leave an unsewn tail here. Now I'm going to pin the binding in place. Next, we will sew to a 1/4 inch from the corner. Using a 1/4 inch seam, sew down your binding, stopping 1/4 inch away from the corner of your quilt. I've stopped a 1/4 inch away from the corner and I'm going to fold the binding up to create a mitered corner. Finger press and fold the binding back down upon itself, matching the raw edges of the binding with the raw edges of the quilt, and pin in place. This part of the binding will not be sewn down. Start sewing again a 1/4 inch in and do this all the way around at each corner. Make sure to leave a long tail at the beginning and end of your binding. Now we're going to overlap our binding pieces right sides together, grab our corner clipper tool, and because this is 2.5 inch binding, we're going to use a 2.5 inch mark and measure the edge here that we cut, and we need to line it up. Use the Chaco liner, make a mark, and we're going to cut it at 2.5 inches. So we have a 2.5 inch overlap. As we did before, we will be using the corner clipper tool. We need to make sure we have our binding pieces right sides up, stacked on top of each other. Using the 2.5 inch mark, we align the tool with the bottom edge of the binding and the 2.5 inch mark at the bottom and the corner. Now we cut. Again, align your binding pieces right sides together, matching up your blunt edges just like a puzzle, and pin in place. Sew a 1/4 inch seam, and ta-da! Perfect binding.